Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We couldn't do these without the incredible support of our sponsors, and we want to take a moment to say thank you to all of them. First, thanks to our diamond sponsor, Varsity Brands, including BSN, Varsity Spirit, and Herff Jones. Varsity Brands, elevating student experiences in sport, spirit, and achievement. We also want to say thank you to our platinum sponsors, including Ephesus Lighting, innovating a brighter future at every level. Gipper, sports graphics made incredibly simple. Camp Mobile, where leaders communicate better. Vital Signs, bring student achievements to life. And Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Thanks to all of our great sponsors. All right. Okay, we're on. Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today is a very good friend, Doug Stevens. Doug is a longtime Florida coach and athletic director. He's also a state caliber basketball official, and he's currently the senior pastor at Fellowship at Midway Church in Midway, Florida. He's also the director at Live the Life in Florida and South Georgia. Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it. Appreciate being able to be on with you.
Well, I know you're just like an AD, you're very busy, so we're going to jump right into it. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school and college, and how your obviously your love of sports kind of led you into where you're at right now.
Sure. So I was born in DC, right outside of DC in Maryland, and grew up there. Started playing sports when I was 3 years old, organized sports, and played all the way through college. So I went to high school in Pomfret, Maryland. It's Lackey High School, and I played two sports there. And then multiplied a little bit more when I went to college and played three sports in college. So I went to Charles County Community College. Now it's the College of Southern Maryland. And then transferred my junior year to Trinity Baptist in Jacksonville. So I played baseball, basketball, and soccer, and enjoyed those all the way through. I think then started coaching like right when I came out. I would go to those smaller schools and they'd be like, "Hey man, we need a coach." And you'd get in on one sport and they're like, "Hey, you can coach. Hey, we need you on this sport." And then all of a sudden, "Hey man, our baseball coach can't do it anymore. Can you coach?" So by the time I was done, I was like roped into like four coaches. And I think a lot of your ADs have probably had similar situations where they've had to, do a lot more than they were wanted to or expected to.
Oh, absolutely. And that's not just limited to, the small school experience. Coaches at larger schools, they say, wow, this guy's a pretty good coach. Maybe we should have him do another sport. Well, take us into that journey, after, Trinity, those just getting out of college, those first couple of jobs. Take us through that journey.
So my first stop was in Jacksonville, and I went to a small school called Victory Christian in Jacksonville, and loved it. Enjoyed my time there. I started to use sports. Had always been a thing for me. Like I had coaches speak major influence in my life. That probably one of the reasons why I got into the helping profession. I remember going when my high school baseball coach Sam Oliver asked me to help at a Special Olympics. I said, sure. And so I got done with that. And he spoke life into me, man. He was like, man, Doug, you're definitely one for the helping profession. At that point, I had never even really thought about what I wanted to do. Really, to be honest with you, I was just there because Coach Oliver asked if I would go. And, you want to score points with your coach and, be a part of, whatever it is that the team does. But then, he asked me and I was like, sure. And I actually loved it. And from that part, I started like working in summer camps and, somebody asked, what was your major? And I wanted a major in coaching, but that really wasn't a thing back then. We're in the 80s. Of course, you have specialized things now. I wish I had had all that specialized stuff back then, but back then, if you wanted to coach, you needed to be a teacher. So I ended up going through education, and my first degree was in secondary education. So yeah, I ended up going to Jacksonville, and then did that for a year, and then ended up going 2 years later to Tallahassee, to a small school called Maranatha Christian, I was there for 8 years. It's now defunct, but had great times there. And then went into ministry position. I took a youth pastor position at North Florida, where North Florida Christian, the school is here in Tallahassee. I was there for 8 years as a youth pastor. And then when I went to go plant fellowship at Midway Church, went back into my love, my tent making, which was teaching, and went back there, and they asked me if I could coach. So I went back into coaching, and coached at East Gadsden High School, which is now merged with West Gadsden, and now it's called Gadsden County High School. So I was there for 11 years.
And that's where you and I first crossed paths when I came to Tallahassee, and I got to see you in action as an AD and a couple of times as a coach on the sideline, and just start a great friendship. And then that led to our relationship as basketball officials too. You mentioned your baseball coach as having an impact on you, and in our professions, we always talk about the importance of leading and mentoring that next generation. So who are some of your other mentors, either coaches or teachers that impacted you, or maybe people that you worked with or worked for? The expression I always use is, I still hear those voices in my head when I'm talking to a kid or a coach or maybe a parent. So whose voice do you still hear?
Yeah. So when I went to Maranatha, my ID was Alan Risk, and Alan was one of the first people. He was on Coach Bowden's first team at Florida State. So Alan's a really funny guy, and Alan would always tell me about he was part of Coach Bowden's only losing season. So that was always his thing, and so he would always joke on things like that. But one of the things that Alan told me, because I was a real passionate coach early on, especially, and passion sometimes can be unbridled, and so part of that was yelling, and sometimes yelling maybe without purpose. And one of the things that Alan would say to me was, Doug, make your coaching style so much so that every parent will want their kid to play for you. And man, when he spoke that into me, it made me think through a lot of things. And so Alan's voice is one of those ones. Andy Gay is a longtime athletic director. He's leader in Gadsden County. He's definitely one. His voice was always there. And then a buddy of mine that you probably refereed some of his games, Demetric Salters, who went from East Gadsden to Lincoln. Now he's at Robert F. Monroe. Demetric was a good friend that we did things together with as coaches there, and then also became my boss for a little bit as an athletic director. So those were all guys that just really were able to speak life into me, and good friends to this day.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear the journey and the people that we meet along the journey. It's a good reminder that we didn't do this all by ourselves.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about your experiences and I guess your perspective. You, by your own admission, and I've seen you. You're a passionate coach, and you do a great job. You also had that global perspective as the athletic director at a fairly good sized school, and you've worn that third hat and still do as a basketball official. As an AD, how did you approach your coaches as far as relating to, and for lack of a better word, having a positive relationship with officials?
Well, I think at that point, and that's a great question, Jake. At that point, everybody knew that, when I came in as AD, that not only was I a coach, but I was an official. And so it was with that platform, I guess you would say, that I was able to talk about, what it is to speak to officials as a coach. And so I really wanted to, lay out there for them, hey, you know, you're going to get a lot more by speaking words, kind words to officials than you were just yelling at them. And I really spoke to them about building relationships because I mean, if they're around the sport at all, man, I've officiated some of these coaches in this area for over 2 decades. You know what I'm saying? So it'd be a good idea to build relationships rather than just be the lone ranger and you're pissed at everybody, so you're just gonna like yell at stuff. That really doesn't do much for us as officials. You know that as well as an official. So it's a lot better to build relationships and maybe understand, hey, maybe why was that call called if there's a question at a call. But really what I talked to my coaches about was just coach your team. You don't have to be so consumed with what the official does. The official's there for the contest. Really, you should probably be a lot more in the 95% range where it really doesn't have much to do with officials. You just coach your team. And then that other 5%, make those interactions better, make them more relationship oriented. And you'll find that you'll enjoy the sport a whole lot more. Some of the coaches around here, especially the younger coaches, they don't enjoy the sport because they're yelling the whole time. They're yelling at officials, fans. I mean, if their girlfriend or wife comes up to them or their boyfriend or husband, like they're yelling at them. I mean, it's like, enjoy this thing. You just said that a little bit earlier. Enjoy the journey, man. It's just this happened. You and I got old quick, man. I'm 51 years old and that stuff goes by quick, doesn't it, Jake? It happens way quicker than you want it to. Let's put it that way. So, man, make it enjoyable. Like, don't make it so pressure oriented for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we all want to win, but if that's your only motivation, your only goal, you're going to be a very frustrated coach or AD or whatever. It's build those relationships. And you didn't mention, I see so many coaches that are yelling at their kids. You talked about coaching intentionally and coaching with a purpose. I would always tell our coaches at McClay, yell if you want to, but yell instruction, yell encouragement, give them something to go back on the floor, the field, so they can be successful. Don't just say, come on, you got to rebound. Oh, no kidding. Okay. Tell them what they got to do. So yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Next question. One of the things we try to do with this podcast is the idea of sharing best practices, some nuggets that an AD who's listening can take back with them. So you've had an opportunity here in the Panhandle as a coach, as an AD, and now as an official to probably see some really good best practices at a variety of schools. So can you share a couple of things now with our listeners? And maybe this is something you did at East Gadsden while you were the AD, but what are one or two best practices that you've seen athletically at some of the schools in the Panhandle?
Well, heck, most of the people that are listening probably know most everything of that would be best practices. But I always feel, I do a lot of like teacher in services and things like that. So I don't ever want to go into that platform and think that, like I'm some like all knowing person that's giving them any great information or whatever, but everything's so digitized now, right? So like learning to do that, making your job so much easier, right? We want to work smarter, not harder. And, doing things like even digital ticketing with like GoFan or something like that made my job so much easier. Like people were just showing their phone coming in the door and, swiping some things there. But man, I'm just one of those ones, Jake, where even as a teacher, like everything was so digitized, but every once in a while, like I still had that red grade book, right? Where I wrote everything down and like I'm old school like that. I like to have that. So I know that some people are going to, stay to some of the old things, but some of the old things are the best things, like making family. Like I think if there's a best practice that I'd ever have, it's make the culture of what you're doing, make it family, get people talking, like build a relationship. Like I've been in schools where they were it was like silo mentality. Like, I've got my sport over here, I've got my class over here, and the administration would be barking, and then the ADs would interpret it one way, and like, it would be great just to have a unified, family oriented, kind place to work, because that's the kind of place that you want to stay around for a few years. You don't want to just like be there and then look for your next platform of coaching. And I think we're missing that a little bit. Just what I've seen around the area. There's not the pipeline of coaches, maybe not quite like it was before. I see some frustration in some of my coaching friends as I talk to them about what's going on. And I really think that as an AD, we set the culture for the program, for the school, for athletics. And so there's so much power in setting culture that I just wouldn't want anybody that's listening to forget about that, right? Like you may know it, but don't like put that to the forefront of your mind. What are you doing that's making a positive impact on your coaches, on your players, your athletes, and really not just leadership leaking down, but also leaking up. What are you doing to help change the culture of your administration towards sports?
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that because it is so important, and you've hit on it a couple times already. Just bottom line of making and building those relationships are going to lead to whatever success you're able to experience as a coach or an AD. So appreciate you sharing. Another topic that we've been talking about since we started these back in June is COVID. And to our listeners, we're recording this on February 16th, so we're almost 1 year into COVID. So Doug, share a little bit about, and again, I understand you're not at a school right now, but you do, lead a number of different programs. What's going on in, the Panhandle area with regard to, return to play activities, as well as, return to school or return to church and worship? What's happening with regards to COVID?
Man, all of the above, Jake. There's just so many different reactions to that, right? So in our area in the Panhandle, I think it's a little bit more, conservative than some of the other places. So you tend to have people that are willing to go back, and we've got some places that have full gyms, right? And heck, there some of them like not a mask in sight, and then there's other places that Leon County, the way that they've done it is like, each player can have four people in their family, and they're expected to mask up. So the reaction is like from one extreme to the other. As an official, holy cow, like I've been officiating since 98. Okay. And so that's like 23 years. I haven't had 7 games canceled for my 23-year period. In 1 week this year, I had 7 games canceled as an official. Like,
Wow.
so that's crazy for everybody's perspective, from everybody from the AD to the person, for Quincy Officials Association, Dante Saylor does all the scheduling. Could you imagine what a nightmare it is for him to get a call from a coach and now, hey man, we're on the bubble, so we got to quarantine for 2 weeks, so that next however many block of games with this amount of officials, right? So it's crazy. There's no rhyme or reason, and everybody's got to feel that out for how they feel. I mean, I've had coaches that resigned their position as coaches because they didn't feel comfortable with coming back during COVID time. And then there's some people here that have treated it, no different than any other virus that we've ever been through in our nation's history. And they just have kept plowing through it. But, trying to figure out what the right way is and the wrong way is. There's a lot of individual perception and judgment on that. So, but I just know that it's had a huge effect everywhere. I mean, we can see that in just about other places. My hometown up in Maryland, a lot of them, they still weren't even doing sports, so when they were doing sports, it was, very limited at best. And, a lot of the parents are, frustrated. They're like, our kids don't have, outlets, and, so there's this tension, right? There's this balance between, safety, and also there's other things like mental health. And, that's some of the great things that sports has been a part of kind of got ripped out, right? And so, you're still seeing, it's the same thing. Like you watch, I watched last night, I watched the Wizards play the Rockets, and there's nobody in the stands there. So it's just like, you got some people that are doing some things and some that are doing another, and there's just not everybody's got to kind of come to their own conclusion about that, and just be safe and healthy, and work through it together.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, not just in the panhandle, but across Florida, we've seen a wide variety of responses. The schools down in Miami, Dade County, they got a tremendously late start for fall sports, and now they're into winter. Um, I am going to put you on the spot one more time, hopefully just one more time, without naming a specific school or AD. You've certainly had a chance to see a lot of different responses on game day as an official. So, have you seen a particular school that how they chose to handle, COVID or fans or whatever? That when you walked in the gym and you're just checking things out, you're thinking to yourself, "Hey, this is really good. These people, really hit it out of the park." So, have you had an experience like that where you were very impressed, and what was it? Again, you don't have to name the school or the
Sure,
AD.
sure, sure. Well, that's a tough question, because then also that would be limited to my perspective as far as like what is, to me, where I'm not as, as concerned about masking up or whatever. And so I don't know that would go, that would translate to all your peoples. But basically the same people that have done well administratively, that take care of attention to officials, where they put us, how they treat us, what they offer us. You know, if if there's any problems with people in the stands or whatever, those are the same people that do well, whether it's COVID or not COVID. It just kind of translates really well for them, I think.
And I think that's a very fair answer. I know that we did not use Quincy officials for basketball, because we had a couple of employees that referee for Quincy, Scott and myself. But we always tried to be that school for the officials, regardless of the sport. That we were going to greet them, we were going to have a room for them, we were going to take them water at halftime or whatever, so that they wanted to come to Maclay and work a game, as opposed to, oh, gee, we got to go there again. And I think the protocols that our ADs have put in place this year have reinforced that. So, very good answer. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump into your current calling, if you will. You chose to step away from being the athletic director to take on a new calling a couple of years ago. So talk a little bit about that, and maybe talk a little bit about, how that still keeps you connected. And it's an obvious one, but still keeps you connected with kids and families and relationships.
Sure, I appreciate that. So I went to work for a nonprofit called Live the Life, and we are a relationship education specialty place. We do tons of stuff for churches, organizations. We're doing some stuff for FCA, for instance. We have all the special forces contracts in the country. We do a lot of military stuff because our stuff works. Our relationship education works. We've gotten into the mold of doing middle school and high school relationship, because we want to get upstream, right? Teach them how to have good, healthy relationships upstream. So we've started there as well. And so yeah, the place that I work for it's the best organization I've ever been a part of, hands down. I think that it's part because of our founding president, Richard Albertson, who, by the way, is if you go to Florida High's gym, his dad's name is there. Bob Albertson was one of the winningest coaches in basketball history in the state of Florida. So Richard has great stories about that as well. But he's our leader, and it's just a great place to work for. And we're in all kinds of places, and we can come into do one for schools. We do marriage retreats, we do counseling, we're kind of all over the map in terms of relationship education. So it's been one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Like I've been so reliant on sports as part of who I am, and this really doesn't have as much to do with sports. But yes, it has everything to do with sports, because relationships are built and are the foundation for what we do in our calling, our vocation. That old Latin term for vocation, right, is calling. We're called into what we do.
No, absolutely. I can see the sports connection very readily. Doug, I know you're very active on Facebook. I see the posts all the time for some of the events and retreats that you do. If one of our listeners, wanted to get in touch with you and find out a little bit more, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So they can certainly go on our website, livethelife.org. They could reach me at doug@livethelife.org. We're all across the state. We have offices in Jacksonville. We have office in Panama City. We also have an office in South Florida and Broward. And so we've got an awesome cast of people that can go in and build something for you to help. We can do in-services for schools. We do a lot of those. Get great feedback on that. For some people, it's the best thing that they've ever been through as far as in-service. You've probably been to 1.2 million in-services in your time of teaching. I have as well. And a lot of them are like, oh my gosh, can you get this thing over with? But ours, we built it around relationship stuff. So it's just so good. And we get a lot of great feedback for that. So yeah, if they want to do that, they can hit me up on that. They can also look me up on social media. I'd be glad to talk to them about anything that they'd like to talk about.
Okay. So that's livethelife.org, or you can also reach Doug directly, doug@livethelife.org. Okay. I encourage you to do it. Okay. Doug, we're not quite done yet. You can answer this one from a number of different viewpoints, but I always ask the athletic directors, what's your favorite part of the job? And after about the first 60 or 70 podcasts we did, the answer was always the same. Oh, it's the kids. And of course, it's the kids. You wouldn't be in this position if you didn't enjoy working with young people. But acknowledging that you love working with kids, what are some of the other things that would give you your favorite moments on your job?
So my top two things, hands down, and I wouldn't have even said the kids, really, although kids would have been part of it, right? But building relationships. So that goes to the kids, but it also goes to my staff, and then it also goes to my administration. And that was, I treasure that as part of what I did. And I think my only regret are the times where I got too busy and it really, my job took over, and I don't think my relationship building was as strong as it should have been. That and creating the culture, man. I love that. I love to be able to set the mood of being a servant leader and getting around you and helping to serve somebody like you or somebody like that person or that person. And when I start serving, I feel like I'm building into other people as well. So being able to create that culture to me is hands down the best.
I think that is probably one of my favorite answers. We've done over 100 of these now. And I think it's probably one of my favorites because it describes, how I would answer that question. Yeah, the kids are part of it, but it's those relationships you have with kids, with teams, with coaches. with, my bosses, and I dare say even with many of our parents, seeing those relationships develop over the years. So really appreciate you sharing that. Um, I'm guessing you might have a very unique answer on this next one. When we started doing these podcasts back in June, the events that took place in Minneapolis and then later in Atlanta were, still very much, on the front of everyone's mind. And we continue to talk about it today. And so my question is this, as an athletic director or as someone who works with young people, what are some things that we can do better in this area of social awareness or social justice? How can we do a better job?
So I really think one of the biggest issues is just being able to create a culture where people can communicate. So, it's one thing to have thoughts and ideas, but it's another thing to create that culture to where it's safe for somebody that disagrees with this person over here to be able to talk about that. And then for this person over here to say, well, this is how that makes me feel. Right. And to be able to actually have, and I think sports does a great job in doing that. I think, you follow Scott too, one of your fellow coworkers over at Midway. He just had a great Facebook post a couple weeks ago about sports was the place where that became safe for him to talk to other people about things that got him out of his comfort zone. And I think sports naturally does that, but I think it also is a place where it can create a conversation. So just as a coach or an athletic director, just being intentional about it. Just talking to your kids. I mean, I had a diverse group of people in Gadsden County. We were 90% African American, 7% Hispanic, 2% other, and 1% Caucasian. So most of the people didn't look like me. And so I had to listen to how people felt about things, and I had to let them know how I felt about things. And there's a learning process that goes with that, but it's also, I think you create the culture to be able to talk about those things. And so by you doing that, that's what, if you make it a safe place to even talk about hard things, and I think that that's a learned skill. I think that you will see so much fruit from that. Or you can just create a culture where people just like do the silo mentality, which other people are doing. And I can tell you that is happening still, where, that I just refereed in a school the other day that they had that, and they had the results of that too. And I could share those, but it would, you would know who the school would be based on it. And I wouldn't want to do anything like that.
I love the phrase you used, create a safe place for the hard conversations. I think that says it all. Right? Well, Doug, it's been great catching up with you, but we're not quite done. I always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. Okay. Now, we've already established, you're no longer actively an athletic director, but you're still very much involved in the high school athletic world. So here's my challenge. I want you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 items in their toolbox. Okay. What 3 things are going to go in Doug Stevens' athletic director toolbox?
So the first thing I would say is you, as an athletic director, create a culture of accountability and excellence. Okay. So you get to set that. And so first of all, you have to do that for your job. You have to be excellent at your job. But then you also have to demand excellence from other people. We talked about how you speak to officials. So you have accountability for that. You have accountability. I'm not going to hold you as accountable for your win-loss record, but I am going to hold you accountable for your process. And so if your process is good, then you can become accountable in that process. And if there's something that's off as an athletic director, I can help tweak that and show you how to make that better. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is I would say what I just described, do that in the posture of a servant leader. So as a leader, you can take it as something that you're going to be dictatorial, or you can micromanage people, or you could be a servant leader. You can say, you can round off the edges of the things that you're trying to say that are hard. So for instance, maybe maybe a principal says, hey, I've got some stuff I need you to hand down to these coaches, and it's really hard. You can maybe take that and round those edges off and say it in a relatable way that can help coach up that coach, so that you've got a great opportunity to teach. And so do it in the posture of a servant leader. And then the last one, I would say, that'll take you a long way. Love and encourage people, man. Just love and encourage people. You're going to be in a place where people are going to look up to you. And the more you do it, the more you love people, the more you encourage people, the better off you're going to be as a result.
Boy, great advice. And I love how it all comes back to this idea of culture and relationships. Okay. Wise words. Doug Stevens, livethelife.org. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Jake. It was awesome. I always appreciate time with you, and hopefully it could help one person, man. If it's one thing that was said that could help somebody, then I'll feel like this was a success today. So I appreciate you.
Oh, right back at you. And again, to our listeners, if you want to get in touch with Doug, that was Doug at livethelife.org. Remember, these Zoom recordings are also being uploaded to the FIAAA Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. And until next time, thanks for tuning in to the Educational AD.